when we talk about our past, our body has memory and it remembers experience maybe with another situation. So, and how you may have gotten hurt by that. So you get in defense, your body goes into defense mode. So it's like thoughts, emotions, and your body. So it's a full workout. So for me, the development has been to just to notice that inside of me when that's going on, and am I tightening up? I know really right off at my gut, I can even, even as I talk about it, when I start to, remember some of these conversations I've been part of and in, and how I showed up, the tightness inside of me. So to be able to let that basically have its moment and flow so that you can dissipate and show up, being human.
So what do we have today? Because right now we're not having a difficult conversation, but I'm pretty sure it's a difficult conversation.
I don't know if we want to call it difficult. That's an assessment.
No, but when we discussed what the next
being in holy shit. I think we talked about being in holy shit mode. But it could be the difficult conversation. That's how it always, typically we label it.
The messiness.
And I'll bring up the visual in a minute, but I guess it doesn't matter what the conversation is. I think there's always triggers that will take us into that holy shit mode.
So every conversation can be difficult, and every difficult conversation has a silver lining and can be pleasant or productive.
Well, I think what you would see as a difficult conversation, I might not see as a difficult conversation.
It's true.
So it'd be, what is it for you? What are those conversations that you go, oh dear, it's going here, or oh dear, this is one I know I want to have, and I'm going to totally avoid this because I don't want to have it. So, but some people say, well, I don't have a problem saying, I'll be in a group. I don't have a problem going over and having that conversation. Well, okay, go. So you can even be with a group of people and they don't see it as difficult. But boy, oh boy, inside here, that is not my comfortable conversation to have. What about you, Ian?
I mean, I think it just depends on what it triggers internally for the individual. And there's lots of things that will send me into holy shit mode. And I sometimes I don't even know I've gone there. And it takes a while for me to recognize that I'm no longer present in the conversation. I'm worried about what they're thinking about me, or what their next question is going to be, or is there some sort of judgment that's happening, or maybe I'm judging them for what they've said or done or whatnot. And it's that moment of like where the light bulb comes on, where you're like, I'm not here at all. And if I don't recenter myself and start listening to them, I'm lost. And I think that's the beauty of at least having the visual, and I'll bring it up here in a second, is that we all go there. We all disconnect from the conversations that we have. And it's in the recognition that you've gone there that you can then become present again.
And I think for us in the work that we do, when people are starting to build their capacity on what's a coaching conversation look like? How do I offer that in a way? I want to do a good job. Is this the right time to do it? When we started to do the boot camps to help people find more confidence and competence in having a conversation that may be a little messy, helping them see that it isn't just you that's in holy shit mode. Typically it is like our first connect was about the conversation dance. Your partners got their own thing going on, or a group has is also in holy shit mode with you. So I love the idea of seeing this as, I'm going to use two N words, normal and necessary.
Well, you can't change what you can't see. So it's in the recognition that you're in holy shit mode, that you're not present, and then you can start naming some of the things that are there. Is it the voices in my head? Am I making an assessment about what this person is doing or saying? Am I, if it's coaching, am I coaching the topic? And then also even being aware that if I'm there, they're there, or they could be there, then to ask questions that will untangle them from their holy shit mode as well. What's behind that fear? What's a deeper question to ask them that's going to help them get a little bit of clarity and get out of that space that they're in? What's up, Mark?
I just love the conversation. Ian, internally, absolutely. That holy shit mode resides internally, based on my perception, my way of being at the moment. And you said it, my little voice. One of my favorite sayings is, nothing has a meaning until I give it a meaning. Nothing has a meaning until I give it a meaning. And very often I give it a meaning. That's going to be a difficult conversation. I take things personally, sometimes even before it happens. So it's one thing to take things personally, but it's a whole different level taking it personally before it even happens. So what I'm taking out of our conversation so far is that we definitely put ourselves there, but that's okay. We put ourselves there. It doesn't mean you have to stay there. It doesn't mean we have to stay in that frame of mind, because the bad news is we are going to go back there again. We are not going to stop having difficult conversations. We're not talking about how do we avoid difficult conversations today. We're not talking about how do we get out of difficult conversations. What we have talked about repeatedly, and I mean repeatedly, constantly, is how do we compose it? How do we be in those situations? How do we be towards ourselves? How do we be towards the other person? How do we honor what they're saying? How do we go deeper and understand what they're saying? How do we get authentically curious? I want to say how we make the best of it, but it's not how do we make the best of it. It's how do we make that conversation the best part of that day. So turn that difficult conversation between Ian and I into the best part of that day. And sometimes it's, I anticipated that conversation with Ian was just going to be, oh, I got to talk to Ian. He's going to go there. He's going to say this. I'm going to say that. We're going to disagree. And then we have what we'll call these fart bubbles, where one brings what there's like this
thought new. I haven't
thoughts
been here with Mark before.
There we go. So we think about this and we say, okay, I'm going to have this conversation. Oh, if I have that, he's going to go there, and we're going to say this, and I'm going to say that, and he's going to react, and that logic, that soap opera that plays in my head before everything even happens, and is just astounding.
Mark, I think what you're getting at, and you talked about this really well in when you talk about fear of the past and showing up and things like that. It's that experience that you've had in the past that didn't go so well, and then you project it into the future as this is going to happen, or something like it is going to happen. So because we're thinking about what triggered us before and how it's going to feel later, we disengage.
We're not there.
We need to stay here. You're right. We got to stay present in order for that to take place.
But how hard is it to stay present? Because when we're talking about those difficult conversations, that's probably the most difficult thing to do when we're having a difficult conversation, is to stay in the moment, because we're taking ourselves out. You said it, both of you, so far in many ways during this conversation we're having today. We take ourselves out, and we do take or that little voice takes you out. So, and it comes back to what I know Karen likes to speak to, is our way of being. How am I being right now? How do I need to be right now? Who do I need to be right now? Again, for me and for you. So that means honoring what's going on and realizing this comes back to relationship and to understanding that there's something behind it, something that's important to the other person and to me, even in front of somebody who's angry, which is a difficult conversation. How do you stay present when somebody's angry? Well, very often it's understanding that behind anger, there's very often fear or pain. And once you understand that fear or pain, clearly by asking open-ended questions and being authentically curious, two magical things can happen. One is that anger may be diffused by the other person because they're now speaking what's underneath, dealing with the true feelings. But the other thing is you understand as well, because anger meets anger. But what if anger doesn't meet anger? What if we're having a difficult conversation and there's anger, and then on this side there's understanding? Authentic relationship type questions, not condescending, not checking the box, but authentic. I want to know what's going on. I'm curious. I'm committed to our conversation. I'm being right there without that low voice. It's hard, but it's doable.
I was, you often want to stop so you talked about anger meets anger. You're wanting to stop it instead of letting it flow and letting it have its full body experience, because it's a full on body experience. When you're you're feeling like, some anger, some frustration, they may be, saying things to defend themselves. Like, if you're needing to talk to them about something that's really important between the two of you, I'm thinking of, with Glenn and I, after 39 years married, there's been a lot of those conversations. And it is, it's not just our thoughts. You said something about anger, it's our emotions. And it's also, when we talk about our past, our body has memory and it remembers experience maybe with another situation. And how you may have gotten hurt by that. So you get in defense, your body goes into defense mode. So it's like thoughts, emotions, and your body. So it's a full workout. So for me, the development has been to notice that inside of me when that's going on. And am I tightening up? I know really right off at my gut, I can even, even as I talk about it, when I start to, remember some of these conversations I've been part of and how I showed up, the tightness inside of me. So to be able to let that basically have its moment and flow so that you can dissipate and show up, being human. When we talk about the conversation dance and you start stepping on their toes and you just did a big on their big toe, and you can tell by their reaction. So how do you recover from that when that was not your intention? So yeah, it's really messy. So the reset buttons. So yeah, it is big and it's really helps when you're just showing up and resetting without them even seeing that, how it softens them. That's what I've noticed.
How does this show up for you two in regards to coaching conversations?
A lot of coaching conversations are messy to begin with. A lot of them are difficult, and they're difficult for the person who's receiving the coaching or the benefits of the coaching conversation. They're also difficult for the coach. How often have we said and have we witnessed coaching conversations where the topic put on the table, I can so relate to, I'm going through this right now, I've gone through, and it brings up these past emotions and feelings and maybe current ones, and that takes me out. That's a difficult conversation. So that shows up. So, but being able to park that, and again, how does it show up in coaching conversations? It shows up in those ways, but it also presents itself with an incredible opportunity to be of service to the other person in that conversation and to ask those authentic questions. And here I can't help but praise the benefits of open questions. instead of assuming that I know what's going on with that person. And you know what? It comes to mind right now. Very often, those difficult conversations are because we've assumed something. I'll get back to my earlier comment. Nothing has a meaning until you give it a meaning. Well, Karen, if you're going to say something in a conversation, I'm going to give it a meaning. Is the meaning I gave it the right one? Is it what you intended? Probably not. So why wouldn't I venture an open-ended question saying, what do you mean? How so? Tell me more. How's that show up for you? And all of a sudden you give it a different explanation. I go, okay, because I went way over here, but you're over here. So the power of those open-ended questions in that coaching conversation in this holy shit mode is really beneficial. Now, I want to say an outcome, but I'm not going to judge the outcome, but some type of more positive outcome or positive experience rather than that negative one that we associate with holy shit mode.
For me, it's when I'm in holy shit mode, because when I'm not feeling like I'm serving the other person. So there's questions, there's just stalled. They're stalled, and I can see there's some discomfort there and concern and worry for themselves, and I start to feel like, oh God, I'm just not the right match for this person. Why are you still doing coaching, Karen? Like, I mean, I get really beating myself up. And then, afterwards I realized they say they're always, wanting another, do you feel like you're complete now? No, I want another session. This was great. So I reminded over and over again, it's not my journey. It's theirs. So that's a really big thing for me in most of my conversations now is, it's not my journey. The other one, though, I will say on the personal level, and there's where I find it gets difficult, I've called it a difficult conversation, is when it's rubbing up against a core belief or value, a strong one in me.
Yeah.
Boy, do I feel very different. I don't like how I'm being inside, and it's almost, I can't stop it. So big reaction in here.
That uneasy feeling you first described, we all get that in the coaching conversation. But Karen, you and I have both witnessed a master at play when it comes to that. Ian is really good at that. I want to hear how you do it, Ian, when you get in that position where you go, oh, is this person getting what they want out of this because you're a master at it?
It's funny that you think that I'm a master at that. I don't know if I am. But I think it's in my willingness to know when I'm not, and to be okay with sharing that I'm not there. And what was coming to mind as Karen was talking, and it'll tie in, Mark, with your question, is when I start to go into the place of what can I do? And I don't think I've ever phrased it like that before. What can I do to fix this person or help this person or get this person unstuck? Mm-hmm. It's not about me. It's all about them. So when I realize that I am swimming in their story, drowning in the river, which I'm sure we'll talk about as a metaphor in here at some point, when I'm drowning with them, I am of no use to them anymore. And I get there often because I get attached to their story. I get attached to where they want to be, and I want to save your ass, but I can't. So when I do recognize that I'm swimming or I'm drowning, it's because I'm trying to fix it for them and I can't. So when I make that recognition, I will stop and I will say in my head, Ian, what are you doing? What do they need right now? And then I'll ask them that, because by then a lot has come out, and I'll say, hey, what do you need from me most right now? And then they will inevitably tell me exactly what they need. And then I will ask a question that will support them where they are in what they want to do. And they always end up getting exactly what they need. And it wasn't because of me, other than being able to drop into presence and ask a question that was pertinent to them, that allowed them to find their own momentum.
Words of wisdom from Ian today. It's not about you. Get over yourself. That's the title of today's. No, what we've seen you do it. And honestly, I've modeled it, because what you just described is truly a way of being, and being of service to the other person in that messiness, in that holy shit mode.
Thanks, Mark. I wasn't looking for that. But yeah, it's I think it's in the humility of knowing that you're going to go there, that will help you get out. It's like throwing yourself your own life preserver. Because if you drown with them, you're of no service. But if you are there with them, allow them to find that answer. And then they become even more motivated to take care of themselves after that. They have their own recognition and realization. And that's what's going to keep them floating, or seeing the next thing, or making the next decision for themselves, which is ultimately what you want for them, is for them to become self-sustaining, skillful beers.
There would be the naysayers out there who would say, yeah, but there are these times where you have to give direction, you have to problem solve, and you have to be there and give guidance. And you can't always punt it back to them. I have my answer, but I see Karen nodding. I want to hear your answer to that, Karen.
It depends. Again, it's what do they need? It's right, boils right down to a question. They may need you to. So I was just going to go in a direction of when you're required or being asked to give feedback, that can be a really difficult conversation. We've all been there. And I remember specifically one, because I did a lot of the feedback for the trainers for the coaching and for the tools for engagement in the government. And it was all in service of their learning and development on something specifically they were going to replicate. And I remember one particular session, it was really a lot of different personalities. There was some turmoil in the group. It was one of the first ones this has really not been I would use the word, it was a little hostile. Like, why do we have to do it that way? And so it was really interesting for me to be in this. I hadn't been through that experience. So I was giving the feedback, and about halfway through the day, I went into the cafeteria to have a break. And there were two RCMP officers actually that came up to me, and I was holding my stomach and I didn't even know it. And they go, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Oh my goodness, my stomach. I don't feel very good." And he goes, "No wonder." I said, "Why?" He goes, "Do you realize what's going on? Like, you're holding 16 people in that room, this space. You're magically, beautifully, carefully, caringly giving feedback in a very, very, we can see the environment is, it's very electric. No wonder you're feeling that way. You're doing a really, really good job though. And I wanted to give you that feedback." So yeah, sometimes it has to be, if we need to do that it has to be grounded though. And that was something I have written down, is what I've learned over time is, what's the intention? What's my intention? Because you can actually get away from your intention. You can get pulled away from that. It would be easy for me to go combative. But staying grounded in my intention, even in this turmoil, is probably why my stomach was churning, because I was really rooting myself, but I could feel the hostility. But I stayed in the intention. I don't know if that makes any sense at all, what I just said. And I don't know if that's the being present part, but knowing why and your intention behind having to sometimes have these messy, uncomfortable conversations, knowing that having that grounded in yourself can really serve you to stay with the messiness of the conversation and how you show up.
I think the intention is just, it kind of holds your, it's almost like being accountable to what you've set that stage to be. So even if things go a little bit awry, my intention is still there. I've had many conversations with Julie that didn't go great, but in my recovery conversation with, I would be really sure to make sure that my intention was clear. Like, this might not feel good, but I just want to be as open and honest and I was with as much candor as possible. And and I'll even tell some of my clients like this, if they're going into a difficult conversation or a conversation they're not sure how it's going to go, is set your intention for what that conversation will be, how you will show up, and your intention for taking care of that space. And whatever happens in that or around that is out of your control, but at least you set the framework and the foundation to have the conversation, and then everything else is what it is.
It's beautiful. But we take things personally, don't we? We show up and we prejudge, but we also take things personally. So that's beautiful advice, Ian, because that's the good news and the bad news. The bad news is going to keep happening. It's going to keep happening to us, and we're going to keep doing it to ourselves. Both of those are going to happen. And you said it, you both said it clearly, that awareness. So carrying that awareness when they said, hey, this is happening, I'm sure that changed everything for you. Ian, you say it, when you snap out of it, when you say, okay, hold on now here, what's going on? Am I being of service? And that awareness is critical. I'm trying to think of, because I know all three of us have a certain degree of success in getting to that awareness, probably because we've hit the wall so many times, and now we're learning to recognize it, so that awareness muscle memory is there. I'm just trying to think of how can we trigger that? How can we snap out of it? What can we do?
I think you have to break the cycle. Like, you have to do it at least once to notice what it feels like to, and I think the visual supports that, because you can see yourself in the you can see yourself in the bubble somewhere, right? If you feel anything that is taking you out of being in the conversation and being able to follow along and not try to steer it where you think it needs to go. And actually, what was coming to mind a few minutes ago was, it doesn't have to be a negative feeling or circumstance that takes you out of this. You could be joyous and jubilant and on cloud nine. Maybe you just got proposed to or something. Like, you're out of your own mind when you're in holy shit mode. And it could be because you feel so good. Mark giving me a compliment. Maybe now I feel so good, I'm no longer like, I'm thinking I got to come up with something really good to say because Mark said something nice. It doesn't have to be a bad thing. It's just taking you out of being present and in the moment so that you can support moving forward.
I agree. So when we talk about the little voice and past, present, and future, and when we say, typically we say the little voice takes you out in the past, when into your earlier point, okay, those things that happened to you, those bad experiences in the past come back, but there's also, you're right, those past successes that sometimes make me overconfident walking into a conversation or distract me. So you're right. And in the future, we say fear, doubt, and worry are the obstacles that stop you from going forward, but there's also unrealistic goals. Oh, I can do this. This is perfect. We're going to change the world. That takes you out as well. So you're absolutely right. Anything that stops you from being present. And I look at this messiness visual, and I can easily see on the coaching side, that committee that I just described, the assessments that I make, giving things a meaning, coaching the topic, that trap of not taking care of the person, the judgments that I'm going to make, which include taking it personally. And that famous sir or madam expert that show up and say, yeah, you got this, you know this, you've seen this. Yeah, they can all take us out. So getting back to how do we do it, that awareness is key, that it's happening. It's happening right now. It's happening. I'm taking myself out, not listening, not seeing the signs. Yeah, it's a start.
And then you have to find your own ways of becoming present. What is it that you do? That is it taking some deep breaths? Is it writing down, starting to write down what people are saying? If you're, in a conversation where you're, have a piece of paper in front of you, so that's going to ground you back in the listening. And what struck me, and this has been my biggest learning, is being willing to be influenced in the moment by that other person.
What do you mean by that, being willing to be influenced?
That I'm, that there's going to be something that they're going to say. So when we get into roles, it's going to be mother, daughter, coach, coachee, you can feel like they're separate. You know what I'm saying? So I have this role, they have that role, they're that, and so what I'm learned is to be influenced by them, that I see them as an equal partner, and that I'm going to be, what they have to say is important and equally important as to what I'm there to support them with. So it's been big for me to be nimble and let that penetrate me, like literally let that in. If that person has something very different to say, or is, resisting, whatever it is, I've had relationships. I have in-laws now. I have a son-in-law, and I will soon be having a daughter-in-law. So now your family's different, and so different upbringings, and so being influenced by them. When sometimes I'm feeling a little bit edgy about, how they're being, okay, like I need to get curious about why they see that as a way of being in their relationship with their partner or raising their children. It's been big for me. And when I get curious about it, rather than wanting to kind of give them the lesson, it's been really interesting to learn what's underneath all of that and their why. Because they also have an intention. Just thinking, this is just coming to me now. I'm coming in with an intention. What's their intention? And you can't get that if you don't get curious about what's it look like over here, and how's this serving them in their way they want to carry their lives out. See, you have to abandon almost yourself for a little while to be in their shoes. That takes practice for me anyways. So that's what I say. There's awareness. And then inside of that is some practices. And in coaching, you learn some different tools and practices so that you can do that, be with that person, be in their shoes, not be getting wet in the water, which, when getting into their story and trying to, fix them or help them. So yeah, being able to go and sit in their shoes for a while and look at it from their space, almost abandoning. This is going to sound really weird when I'm saying abandoning yourself for a little while, but you're present. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm thinking back to a few experiences of myself where if you just heard the story of what I did, you wouldn't understand. And then having people speak about you behind your back based on their judgment of what you did. So understanding that what I've done doesn't make sense to the average person, but it made sense for me in the moment and the time. And they don't have all the information at their disposal for them to make a good decision. So I'm able, I think now more easily, I'm able to reserve judgment of others because I know people wouldn't understand my story. So why should I judge theirs for the decisions that they're making currently? Because they're the expert in their life. They have all the information at their disposal that I don't have. Even as a coach, you're only going to get snippets and pieces. You don't have the full puzzle. They've got all the pieces. So helping them sort that out without judgment, reserving your own opinion and belief and stories is the biggest gift you can give somebody.
I think very often that famous saying of, I always get it wrong, but a perception without opinion, observe without judgment, that is the way. But I think the judgment and the opinion for me come when I don't have all the information. So in the absence of the whole picture, my mind says it must be this. And then I form my opinion and my judgment. So getting back to the conversation, putting that in a difficult conversation without the benefit of the open-ended questions, the authentic curiosity, that opinion, that judgment are going to stay there. So it just dawned on me that how critical that authentic curiosity that you speak about, Karen, and being able to ask open-ended questions to get information, because these are assessments. These are judgments. That opinion that I have based on what was said, the situation that you describe, Ian, that judgment that I'm making is normal, natural, is going to happen in the absence of the context, in the absence of the perspective. And without asking those open-ended questions, getting that clarity that we talk about in the visual, then it's going to be on both sides, on all sides, depending on how many people are in the conversation. Again, those open-ended questions are so critical.
The one thing that I would add to that, though, Mark, is getting clarity for the other person.
Yes.
Not necessarily for you yourself as the coach, because you don't have to necessarily understand for them to find their own next best action or whatever for themselves, or get that clarity for themselves. I coached somebody in the early part of this year, and I had no clue what he was talking about. It was very technical, financial and building based stuff, and I really didn't know what he was talking about. So I had to stay as out of the problem solving as possible to allow him to unroll and unravel his next steps and what was important to him, because I had no clue.
Made it easy for you not to coach the topic.
I was still in holy shit mode because I was trying to figure out what he's doing, but I had to let go of it because I'm not going to become an expert in that field, and I'm not going to become an expert in 45 minutes either. I have to let him unravel his own stuff and find out why it's important to him and why he needs to do that and what he plans to unravel that day. But I had to let go of the topic.
See, you're in a coaching conversation there in a certain scenario. What happens when that happens on their everyday conversations where somebody's talking to you about something and you have no idea and you don't want to look stupid? So basically I know I'm changing the topic. And well, yeah. Hey, you know that weather, look at what, the topic changes. I get uncomfortable. Or I might just go, but am I going to ask a question? Am I going to ask that critical open-ended question like I'm sure you did, Ian? Am I going to get authentically curious? No, I'm looking for an exit. This elevator doesn't open quick enough.
I actually had a conversation this past summer about COVID and conspiracy and like rabbit hole stuff. And I didn't degrade or interrupt. I just asked him some clarifying questions on what that was and why he believed what he believed, and why this was important. And I didn't go any deeper than that, but I let him talk for about a half an hour. And I found out about a month later how much he appreciated that conversation because I didn't do those things. And he didn't feel judged, and his opinion mattered, and it was okay that he felt what he felt and thought what he thought. And I don't think I didn't feel like I did anything spectacular. I just let him go. but he appreciated it. And he was grateful to have that conversation. And unlike any other conversation he had had with his immediate family or those around him, I just let him go. So something that Karen says all the time, and now I can't say the word for word, is the way that you show up affects the inside of others.
And I think it's important for us, because you nailed some pretty important conversations that have been in the world in these last couple of years, is that assessments are never true or false, but they could be valid. And 90% of our conversations are assessments. 10% are factual. How we interpret the facts are our assessments and perceptions. So it's very complex. And when we can give up they're not permanent. So you can change your mind. So allowing people the opportunity to get to know what their strong views and opinions and thoughts are around whatever they're trying to mobilize, or what's catching their attention, or what's taking their energy, or what's affecting their well-being, whatever it is, man, that's helpful. Because they get to say it out loud, uninterrupted, is what you said, Ian, which I think is so important, which is what I said at the beginning. We so often I find in uncomfortable conversations, you described it perfectly, Mark. We want to stop the flow, and some of that's an exit strategy away from it. I've done that many times, right?
Where's my off ramp?
Okay, I'm over here. I'm going to go, thanks, have a nice day. And I'm heading over here to talk to Sally. So just giving people permission and the time to let their thoughts go, and for them just to think about them for themselves, and ask a couple of questions that would just help them understand where that comes from, and how is that supporting you, and how is it getting in your way, so that they can make choices about changing. And I mean, when I found out 90% of my thoughts and what I was saying wasn't permanent and I could change them, it was like, what? All those belief systems that held me back, and what I was told as a young person, you mean I can actually reshape them or pick something new up? First of all, it was absolutely freeing and totally terrifying, because all of a sudden I had a choice to make, which is really what, in our conversations, when we stay present, we're in choice making all the time. If we start to ask ourselves and get curious, what's that? How's that working for you right now? What a great opportunity for someone to let it go, or say, no, it's really working for me, and say, okay, how do we make sure we bring that with us? So it's been huge. And like Glenn and I have had lots of conversations, my partner, and we're on total different sides of the page, but we give each other the room now to express our perspectives. I mean, when we go to the elections, we typically don't vote for the same party. Glenn always jokes around, why don't you vote for the person I'm voting for? At least they'll count, trying to convince me. But the point is that we have perspectives. We talk about what we care about. And we've learned over time that that's okay to have different perspectives. There's times where that's not okay. But coming to peace with that and is really important. Maybe that's the other piece about difficult conversations, is wanting that person to agree with you versus both of you being able to have a voice and say what you need. It's a different intention and almost a different outcome you're trying to work towards. Versus, I want you to hear me. I need to tell you this because I'm upset and I don't want you to do it again.
Final thoughts on holy shit mode, the messiness, difficult conversations.
I take away, it's not about me, and be authentically curious.
And I'll say it's all about me. Because if you can't change what you can't see. So for me, it's all about interrupting the pattern. And the more often you interrupt the pattern of not being present to become present, you can catch yourself faster and faster and faster and the more potential you have to be present more often.
Yeah, the famous saying, if you see that cartoon, who wants change, and everybody puts their arms up, and then the next question, who wants to change, and nobody puts their hand up. It's building the capacity and choosing, like I want to have these conversations. They're important. They bring safety and harmony to myself and to my people I love. So getting the capacity to be able to have those conversations is important to me. And I've seen how it's made me, my relationships stronger, and it's opening up conversations that some people haven't been able to have for a long time about their past. So yeah, it is about me getting more confident and feeling the confidence in how to do that, because I see the value.
Awesome. See you next time on Coaching, Coffee, and Conversation.
Yay. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.